So let's talk security, shall we? It concerns you, concerns everyone, honestly. And this government has, I imagine, as priority, first on that list of priority, security. We're joined on the program this morning by Group Captain Sadiq Shehu, who's a security sector reform and governance expert. He joins us via Zoom, and as you can see right here in our Lagos studio, Mr. Alfred Ononugbo, who's a forensic investigator, a criminal intelligence specialist, and security consultant. He's right here in our studios. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on the program. And may I just say happy holidays to you?
Thank you. Happy holiday too.
Let me start with you, Mr. Ononugbo. Security doesn't go on holiday, really. I mean, we can go on
just
the
like
holidays.
Journalism.
Exactly. Insecurity is always present. In fact, it's during holidays you hear security agencies say we have deployed more men to ensure security and all. But let me start from the last time we spoke. Ever since we spoke, Nigeria has gotten new service chiefs. Nigeria has gotten new national security advisor. And I know there was a lot of talk about who should be in those positions, what the president should do. Incidentally, this is exactly 1 month after President Tinubu was sworn in. So it's been 4 weeks of different activities. But looking at those new appointments, the service chiefs, the NSA, what are your thoughts regarding the trajectory of this government, which says it will change the security doctrine and architecture?
Thank you very much. And in my tradition, I'd like to appreciate the security agents for the fantastic work they're doing across the country. And just like you said, security does not go on vacation. The language of holiday only exists in the books. It's not meant for the watchmen, because should the watchmen go to sleep, the entire system could be harmed by some elements who benefit from such situations. With respect to the question you just asked, I think one should sit back and also look at the choices made by Mr. President and his team. First, the National Security Advisor is, to me, a very strategic decision taken by Mr. President. And also the fact that he selected men who have also been tested, in their different fields and specialties. That's a welcome development. And I've not heard from any quarters any reservations or negative remarks being adduced against those choices. For that, we should commend Mr. President for making such decisions, and we would address, specifics on these nominations or choices by Mr. President. But I think it has also boosted the expectations of Nigerians. We've been plagued by insecurity over the years, and Nigeria have lost close to 30 to 40,000 citizens to crime, violent crimes across the country. It's not exclusive to any part of this country, from kidnap to insurgencies, and also forms of criminal activity. So, Mr. President, taking time to engage men that have been tested, men that have proven that they believe in Nigeria, men who do not subscribe to sentiments, and other things that have weakened the system, seem to suggest that he took kindly to the advice of those who said to him, you need to respond to the yearnings of Nigerians when it comes to security.
Well, let me get Group Captain's opening remarks on this conversation. I know a lot of people have said maybe the president doesn't quite have that honeymoon period, because Nigerians expect things to happen really fast. So they think that there's never really that honeymoon period where Nigerians will give him some time to settle down. They expect him to hit the ground running. I know you've also written about who should be Minister of Defense. You've talked about whether or not it should be an ex-military person or not. You've also had an open letter to the president while he was president-elect. So you've been quite, vested in this. A month into this administration, I don't know whether people will call it a honeymoon period or not, but what can you say about those appointments particularly? Because it is expected that these people will then drive the policies to either change the doctrine or architecture. So what can you say about that so far, Group Captain?
Thank you very much. First, I would like to say that it's always good to understand when we say national security architecture, what do we mean? When we talk of national security architecture, we are talking of the management, decision-making bodies, oversight structures and institutions, as well as national policies, strategies, and plans. Why am I going into this? Because it is good to understand that when you talk of security, it does not just stop at service chiefs. It does not just stop at who you appoint at NSA. It does not just stop at who you appoint as Inspector General of Police. They are part of the national security architecture, but they are only one aspect of it. You had me mention oversight bodies. There are things that the executive branch will do, which if they are not complemented by action from the National Assembly or the legislature, we may not get the results that we said. Now, having said that premise, I would like to say that getting the foot on the, hitting the ground running. We've had, every country has its own tradition. Traditionally, we've had presidents, as soon as they come, they make appointments for their security chiefs, whether it is military service chief, NSA. So in that line, the president has also done his time, and I think his pace is just adequate. Not too much in a hurry, and then not too slow. That's what I would say. As to regards some of the appointments he has made, yes, as didactic writers and people who research on these security issues, we have pointed ways. And I would like to say that with regards specifically to service chiefs, by virtue of my interaction with the Nigerian Armed Forces, I would say within the within the seniority bracket of the military personnel that are on service now, obviously the president has made up his mind that he will not take members of 37 regular corps, and then he will look into 38 or 39 regular corps. These are seniority lists of officers. I would say within that range, the officers chosen as CDS, Chief of Army Staff, Chief of Naval Staff, Chief of Air Staff, they are officers that I know personally by virtue of my being a former military officer and a military instructor. Within that range, they are probably among the best he could have picked. There is no doubt about that. They have a history of performance behind them. So it is I would say it's a very good choice. Now, the issues again that we have to look at, apart from selecting the service chiefs, again, you have to look at the management structures. When we talk of the management structures, you are talking of the Federal Executive Council, the Ministries of Defense, the Ministry of Interior. Now, the president also has to make sure that the quality of these people selected is complemented by selecting people who will manage them. The military, the police are not the ones managing themselves. Strategic leadership, strategic direction should be given by the ministries. So I am calling on the president to make sure also that he looks very well before he picks who is going to be his Minister of Defense, who is going to be his Minister of Interior. After having done that, the National Assembly is already set, ready for work. They are waiting to put their committees. I'm hearing juicy committees and the rest. We are concerned about security. They should be careful, how they put their oversight committees on security issues. Because the truth is that in a democracy, when you look at our national constitution, almost every responsibility or action given to the president over security matters is equally shared with the National Assembly. If the president does a good work in picking his team, if we do not have a corresponding good work from the National Assembly, we may not achieve results. With due respect, the record of the past National Assembly on oversighting military or oversighting security agencies is, I can say, a missed record. I will not give them a pass mark. So we need to see this 10th Assembly, doing more to ensure that they complement the action of the president. We've seen it on TV, on national TV, of a chairman of a security committee saying that what they know is from their culture. They don't discuss budgets of security. They just pass it. I think that's a very pedestrian approach. There is nowhere that you give people, taxpayers, money, and then you say, we over-exaggerate this test. Security intelligence agencies can be oversighted with the necessary, information, with the necessary education. There is nowhere where it is said that security agencies cannot be oversighted.
Right.
If we have assemblymen who think along that way, then honest, all the gains that might be made by the president and commander-in-chief might be lost due to lax oversight from the National Assembly. And again, I come back to the Mr. President and commander-in-chief. When you appoint, contrary to what we see in the past, with due respect, this is my personal opinion, I have found ministers of defense who are generally ineffective. Why? Because there is always a direct link, a direct micromanagement between the security, the military and the president. It shouldn't be like that. I think the work of the president is already too much on his table. Find a quality minister of defense and trust him with the management, with the finances, with the oversight of the security agencies. I think if the president will do that, we'll see an improvement.
Yeah, Group Captain Shehu, I have a very important follow-up to that, but I'll let you take a breather and come to Mr. Nonubu. Group Captain Shehu has pointed us in the right direction, by giving us an aerial view of what this terminology, architecture, security architecture means, by telling us that it's not just about the service chiefs, but it's also about the decision-making machinery that aids the internal operations of, the security institutions. Now, in line with that, has that promised reform by the Tinubu administration of the doctrine and architecture of Nigerian security apparatus, has it begun, not just with the service chiefs now, but with, what is expected in line with what Group Captain Shehu has said? And is the administration moving fast enough with the promised reforms?
Well, I think they've taken the first initial step, which is in selecting what I consider men based on merit. And if we have that script played out down the road, and also the rest of the team, like the group captain said, Shehu said, if we have that reflected in the behavior and attitude of the National Assembly, in the conduct of the rank and file, and also in the internal management of the security agencies, we will likely begin to see the type of security services that will give us hope and bring us to that assurance that the future is brighter. Now, recall that we are coming on a journey. Where we are today is unfortunately abysmal when you consider that we've had a culture of impunity, we've had a lawless approach to constitutional issues across board. So there's a serious reorientation that is needed to be done for us to appreciate whatever will come out of these people. And also have it in mind that they are not going to function alone. Right in their offices are people who probably are there for personal interests, and they will be creating some sort of, breach and slow down the pace of whatever the visions and aspirations of these senior officers could be. So we must also look at the criminal justice administration system holistically, because if there are no punishments for lawlessness, you will be breeding lawless people everywhere, including in the service. And then we should return to the era of merit. I must repeat myself, because if people know that working hard rewards and that doing the right thing at the right time, engaging in duties for the good of all becomes our common goal, we are going to begin to see institutions that are driven by patriotic Nigerians, not foreigners. We're all Nigerians. We're all crying for insecurity. But these insecurities are either perpetuated or aided by Nigerians who refuse to do the right thing when they find themselves in positions. So they should not see their appointments as a privilege. They should see it as a call to duty, as a call to sacrifice, and as a call to study what has happened before. with the mind of coming to new realizations and opening up to new ideas. I don't want to begin to emphasize the issue of the digital space, the role of artificial intelligence and technology in fight of crime. We're not discussing that. We're discussing the quality of men that the president have chosen to work with him. And just like Group Captain Shehu said, and I want to re-echo that, we have seen men given opportunities based on merit, and we hope it will spiral to every other unit and department that ensures that security is delivered to the Nigerian people.
Well, I need to just clear something before we go over to Abuja studio. So we've had a former president, Buhari, who's risen to the very top military, had lots of military spending. I think the Buhari administration spent the most really on security in terms of procurement and all of that. Spent quite a huge chunk of Nigeria's money on that. Hired people from time to time. Yes, took a while to change service chiefs at some point, but changed, had different IGPs. So basically, is this any different from what we have seen in the past, really? Because it looks like when we're talking about what this current president has done, it casts what the former president has done in a sort of bad light. Maybe he took the wrong decisions, employed the wrong people, was not quick to move. Is that what it is, really?
Well, I must caution us not to be too excited. I think we are running and drawing conclusions in a hurry. The music have just started. So we should wait and see the dance steps. It's going to go a long way. We've come a long, bad road to this point. It will be unfair to cancel out the efforts of the former president, President Muhammadu Buhari, retired. And it will also be wrong not to express disappointment that the expectations of Nigerians were not met. And apparently because of the content, the quality of minds that he took on, the reward system, and the accountability platform.
When you say the quality of minds, yes, who specifically are you referring to?
The board stops on the commander-in-chief's table. Today people are hailing and impressed with President Tinubu's choices. He probably did not recommend any of the people that have been chosen.
But the service chiefs, upon assumption of office, lauded the efforts of their predecessors in office.
These are media things. You say things that will impress other people. The taste of a pudding, or the sweetness of a pudding, is in the tasting. Nigerians have tasted every part of these stories. You won't come out to the public to condemn your predecessor because it's waiting for you down the road. You expect to be complimented. And I do not think that, like I would say, they didn't totally fail, but they didn't meet our expectations.
Marco, it's over to you now.
Well, thank you very much, Kayode. And let me take this question to our guest in our Kaduna studios. We do know that our service chiefs, or the service chiefs that have been appointed, usually have to go through the National Assembly for confirmation, and that's why they're still in acting capacity. I'm wondering, from your own knowledge of, the industry and, the security industry, what sort of questions do you think that the National Assembly should be asking of these people who will be confirmed to confirm that they're actually suitable for the job? Yes, indeed, their competence has been, praised, and, the choices that the president has made has been commended. But then, they still have to go through this process. Is the National Assembly just going to be a rubber stamp in this direction, or do you really think that they have a function to perform in actually making sure that the people that have been nominated so far are fit for the job?
Thank you very much. A very valid question and a very important one, especially looking at what has been happening in the past. What has been happening in the past is that during confirmation, I think the lawmakers, either for lack of knowledge or for lack of research, what they ask are only pedestrian questions. And to be honest, it is in national interest for the lawmakers, like I said earlier, for them to also do their work. By now, even though I know they don't have committees yet, that's another problem. Had it been they have committees, by now, this committee should have been looking at the CV of those officers. They have been looking at their past performance. They would have done their own research on what is actually wrong with security. That is the lawmakers. And based on that, ask these service chiefs, what are you going to do now as service chiefs? What are you going to do different? I don't expect any service chief to come and say, for example, that everything is okay with my service. No, definitely every service has a security, but I mean has its own challenges. Now, if the National Assembly members have done this due diligence of background checks, of looking at what is wrong with security, they will be able to ask intelligent and reasonable questions that will improve security. They will be able to extract promises from this service chief for which they can put a timeline. Okay, you said you are going to do this, you are going to raise numbers of your service up to this, and what is your plan? And with that, during oversight visit, they can work on that. But again, to do this, the lawmaker also has to be very knowledgeable. If he doesn't know about security, he has to find people who know about security to tailor questions for him. I am looking forward to a situation where we don't have, the lawmakers asking pedestrian questions. You should ask questions that will. Now, that is why in democracy they say check and balance. It is possible. Here, I'm just assuming it is possible. Mr. President made a wrong choice. A very diligent questioning by the National Assembly will, reveal whether these people that Mr. President selected, whether they are good choices or not. But whereby you don't have the quality of lawmakers to ask those questions, what we are going to have is just pedestrian. What is your name? Okay, you are from my village. Please clap for him. That is not going to serve national interest. So it is very important that the lawmakers going forward, they learn how to oversight security. They learn how to ask specific questions with due respect. If you are in the National Assembly member to do oversight, and you are oversighting army, and you don't know how many officers and men are supposed to be in a battalion, you don't know what is the quantity of equipment that's supposed to be in a battalion, then really, I cannot see how you can do a diligent oversight. I cannot see how you can contribute to national security. I'm very hard on the National Assembly members because they are the ones that come and say, sack service chiefs, vote of no confidence, talking as if they are powerless. I still maintain almost every power or responsibility that the president and commander-in-chief has over security and armed forces, she shares it with members of the National Assembly. A diligent National Assembly can even correct wrong actions taken by the executive in terms of security issues. So this is what we want to see, a rebased National Assembly. Unfortunately, again, ours is a complicated system. I hear about that about 70% or 60% of the lawmakers are new. Even the older ones, they have not done well in this oversight. So in essence, what I am saying, confirmation is supposed to be a serious matter. Whether it is for security members or anything, it is a place where you really subject the choices made by the president to see whether they are really quality. And while you are doing that, the members of the general public, the Nigerians, they are watching. When they hear that these people are top-notch, it will give them confidence. It will give them confidence that the commander-in-chief has made a good choice. It will give them confidence also they have quality lawmakers that will ensure that these people perform.
I know that when it comes to security, we're usually a bit, will I say, I'm looking for the word now, not touchy is not the word, but we're usually, I don't know if you can hear me, Group Captain, we're usually a bit touchy. I'm looking for the right word to use now, but careful would be more the word I'm looking for. A little bit careful when security chiefs or will-be security chiefs appear before the National Assembly. How much of the grilling, since you want a very thorough, will I say, a very thorough hearing, a very thorough confirmation process, how much of that do you think can happen in the open?
There are questions that cannot be asked in the open. There are questions that will ask in the plenary, probably by the select committee, either it is committee on army, committee on defense, or committee on air force. There are questions you cannot ask. Questions that have to do with actual deployment of our troops, questions that have to do with actual equipment holding that we have. But that is not to say these questions cannot be asked behind scene. They should be asked. I think the word you are looking for in security oversight, whether intelligence oversight, security oversight, experts always talk about transparency versus accountability. Definitely security issues, there are some that have to be done in secrecy. But then, transparency should not be sacrificed. Accountability should not be sacrificed. For example, there are very germane questions that you could ask. Chief of Army Staff, how many officers and men do you have? What do you think is the optimal the optimal number that you want the Army to be? What do you think is the optimal number that you want the Navy to be? What will be the optimal number? What is the size? And what is your plan for reaching that number? I think there's nothing wrong with asking questions like that. There's nothing, there are questions that, yes, can be asked openly. So, but sometimes, to be honest with you, we over-secretize these issues, and sometimes the over-secretizing is not in national interest. It is not even in the interest of the armed forces. But then, a very savvy lawmaker will know questions that he can ask in public. He can know options that they can ask in what they call closed door session or whatever session. But what I want our lawmakers to understand is that as a lawmaker, you can ask any question. You can inquire about anything. You do not have to look as if you are powerless. Like I said the last assembly, to be honest with you, I laugh when I hear them saying that we have passed vote of no confidence on this. It's like saying that we don't have any power over security matters as the president. It is wrong. That is not what democracy says. That is not what our constitution said. It says somewhere, I don't know, I cannot quote the particular section, but it says after listing the powers of the president over the armed forces, it says for the president to exercise these powers, he needs the concurrence, and the National Assembly can make laws. They can ask questions. They can investigate on all the powers that the president and commander-in-chief has. So please, let's see our national lawmakers rising of both the executive branch and the legislative branch. They have a very big role to control. One of them cannot do the work. Okay. If one does a good work and the other one does a bad work, we are not going to get results.
Look, Captain Shehu, from your submission here, it points, you shed a lot of light on the role of the National Assembly and the functionality of the Nigerian security apparatus. But let's look at the system itself, the security system itself, and how effective it's been, in the sense that these men and women took an oath to serve the nation. But if we go by what you're saying, it looks as if their oath, what they are meant to do, is somewhat limited because of the role that the National Assembly plays in that role that they're supposed to play. How do you balance things out there?
Yes, it still comes back to what I said. The tendency when we talk about security is to look at service chiefs, is to look at the chief of defense staff, is to look at IGP. But this is a democracy. The National Assembly, they have powers of investigation. They have powers of appropriation. If you are in the National Assembly and a service chief comes, and inside his budget, you are telling him, here, please, I am not putting anybody, but we know how this has happened. And you are telling the service chief to take part of the money that is allocated for his own defense to build a secondary school for you in your village, or to build a hospital in your village. Certainly, you are weakening the security. And you make it in such a way that the man comes to know that if he doesn't do that, he may not get his budget approved, or he may not get his releases. So, in all honesty, if lawmakers are doing that kind of things, they affect, and how can the service chiefs perform? So, in all honesty, in this interaction between, in fact, we even have to look at the interaction between the service chiefs and the National Assembly. In other clans where we borrowed these things, you do not see now what we have. Almost every commander or commandant or a leader of any major formation, he goes to National Assembly to defend budget. And to be honest with you, the kind of conversations that happen during those budget defense, they are not palatable at all. And they themselves, those kind of discussions, those kinds of deals, they affect our national security. What we have in other countries is that the defense of defense budget, for example, is the work of the Minister of Defense, the PAMSEC, at most with the Chief of Defense staff following him. Okay, I am not happy, and I think it is against...
If you don't mind, if I may come in here, I will have to interrupt you briefly. We'll take a moment. I will come back. This conversation, especially around the military-civil relationship, is something that needs to be examined, especially as this new team comes in and begins to look at how to more or less restructure the architecture and doctrine of the Nigerian security system. Plus, we'll also reach out to Mr. Ononugbo. We'll be back in a moment. Do stay with us. Welcome back. We still have Group Captain Sadiq Shehu and Mr. Alfred Ononugbo in our Lagos studio. Group Captain Shehu is joining us virtually. Captain Shehu, before we went on that break, we were talking about what seemed to transpire when it comes to civil-military relations. And over time, we've seen that almost every arm of the military tends to want to build a school, build a hospital, repair roads. But these things are not necessarily the things that they're supposed to be focused on. Are you implying by your submission earlier that those projects that are in their budget are somewhat like infused by the National Assembly? And in that kind of situation, especially now that this new team is about to come in, what would you advise them to do when it comes to military and civil relations and managing the National Assembly or the legislature, as the case may be, both state and federal?
Thank you very much. In every democracy, even advanced ones, the issue of civil-military relations is very germane, because what democracy provides is that the political masters have the powers over the security agencies. But in sharing that role, the political masters should be careful to leave operational and professional issues to the security agencies to handle. Issues of oversight, issues of funding, issues of is Nigeria going to war, issues of how many numbers of troops, the civilian will decide that. So the point I am making is that from what we are seeing, if National Assembly members are taking chunks of security budgets to put in projects that have nothing to do with security, I think that is part of our problem. With due respect, if a National Assembly member would look at the budget of a particular service and say, okay, out of this, I want you to do this for me, that is part of our security problem. That is part of us, and we have to understand it. But you see, again, Mr. President has to do something about this. The current practice of every commandant of the service institution, every commandant of military training institution, every commandant of a research institution going to National Assembly to defend his budget is a very recent one. It's not what we used to have, and it is not a good one.
At what point should the National Assembly step in to say you are misappropriating funds that have been budgeted for a certain thing? At
any time, they have the powers of investigation. It is there in the Constitution. They have powers to investigate. I am not saying about not investigating, but you see, part of civil-military relations is in order to have a professional military force, you have to minimize the interaction between the security agencies and the National Assembly. For that reason, what I'm saying, global best practice is that if there is any defense if there's any budget to be defended by the armed forces, such a work should be for the Minister of Defense, the Permanent Secretary Minister of Defense, and at most the Chief of Defense Staff for giving him, some tips or something as they are going. But a situation where we have so many officers going to National Assembly, I am telling you here that gives room for corruption.
Okay, Captain Shehu, just 1 second, yes. Captain Shehu. Let's move this to Mr. Ononugbo. Mr. Ononugbo, you are a forensic investigator, and you see how these things play out. What would be the best approach in managing the situation, the relationship between our security apparatus and the agencies and the National Assembly and the civilians as a key?
Well, I think we need to look at our national orientation establishments. There are endemic things that have been carried over the years, and they are playing out. Just like what Group Captain Shehu mentioned, these things do not just happen out of nowhere. It's a tradition that's been sustained by unprofessional conduct. And let me also take a swipe on the security agencies. 100% of the men that we call lawmakers today were supposed to have been screened and profiled before they qualified for elections. And when we allow waivers and unprofessional clearing or approvals of candidates to contest elections involving managing the people and resources of Nigeria, and they finally emerge as political representatives of, in quote, their people, whether it was purchased, selected, mandated, or voted, whatever the system or process that produced them. If it's short of the expected standards, we will have what is playing out today. You don't get a clean fish out of a poisoned pond. That's very sad. Now, if our security agencies understand that from the screening point, we can eliminate some of these elements and make sure they do not find space where they become influence, negative influence on our national lives, and also fertilizers to insecurity, then we would have started well. The chain is round. It's linked to each other. So we will need to also look into the system also that produce these people, including the electoral umpires, INEC. So it's a collective responsibility. We can't shift the change we're expecting to lawmakers exclusively. Unfortunately or fortunately, they are the people we have there today. So I'm sure what we're trying to say is that having arrived at this point, they should be able to represent the civil population positively. They are the representatives of the Nigerian people. They are the ones we have elected to, occupy that role and, perform that function. And we expect that they should be able to say, look, for the good of our people, let's do the right things. Let's ensure that the right people are given assignments and people that have capacity to deliver. And also let's make sure that every system that will support them is qualified. So they do not just hijack people, put people, make sure that people who will agree to what they are saying are positioned in positions of administration. So these are some of the challenges we might be having. There's no shortcut out of it, except Nigerians do not want security. If we do, it's not just the National Assembly. Even the communities that elected these men should also be telling them as they return home, please, this is the situation, and we understand that you have a role to play in making sure that security is delivered to our people through your choice of who manages the security architecture, who runs the system. Those are very essential part of democracy. If that fails, we will have despots, we have dictators, we have self-serving people parading themselves as leaders and representatives of the people, but we will be deriving absolutely no democratic dividends out of their services.
All right, let me also ask you this, because people have said that the security architecture needs to be cascaded. It needs to get to the grassroots. And we've seen in recent times attempts by governors to come up with some, I don't want to use the word contraption, but that's the word that's coming to my mouth, because it's still not permitted within our constitution, this matter of state police. How would you suggest that, or do you see any role for the 10th Assembly in this regard? Do you think that this is something that they should take on, this matter of state police? Or do you think that there could be other ways, apart from what the governors have already established, or with this regional, or will I say state security agencies? Because they say that there is no room for regional security agents with the Amotekons, the other one we have in the southeast, which hasn't quite set in yet. So how would you what role do you see for this sort of institutions, or this sort of, will I say organizations within our security architecture? Or how do you think that our security architecture can further be cascaded down to the grassroots and get security to the people where it is needed the most?
Thank you, Mokbe. I rather want to say that, first, I'm a firm believer in community policing, and I think it's long overdue. However, we are plagued by two factors: ethnicity and religious extremism. And these are perversions creeping into our thinking system. So rather than for us to develop something that will be mutually beneficial, something that will be open to help us, we see people insinuate things and, hot efforts, genuine efforts and ideas that would have saved us a lot of problems. And I also would like to say that in developed democracy or civilized societies, I think the priority is the office of the citizens. I've said this some time ago. Now, Nigeria does not have that system where we exalt the office of the citizen above the operators of the system. That's why we have the first citizen, second citizen, and by the time you get to the third or fourth, it stops there. The first citizen are the citizens of Nigeria. The rest are part of that system. Now, this will give even the man in his local community a sense of responsibility that the security of lives and properties starts with him. It is out of these same people that we recruit, train, and deploy security agents. Now, if that culture of patriotism, if that culture of consciousness that our security does not belong to an ethnic group, a security man in uniform represents me, not a tribe, we have a long way to go. And I hope the National Orientation Agency, under this administration, will be able to address these silent, I call them silent poisons. They are the things hitting and killing the structures of governance in this country. And we need to clean that out. There should be severe punishment for anybody that tries to undermine the sovereignty of Nigeria. It doesn't matter by what, expressions. Now, the idea of states having like Omoteku, Ebubagu, and some other groups further kills the objective and the constitutional police position of the police as a force. We need the police, yes, but we also need a breakdown, chains of engagement of local people involved in policing their people. And we should have a word that can make it possible for, if I'm Yoruba and I'm in Igbo land, and I have this passion to be part of that system, I should be part of Ebubagu by whatever names it's called. Or if I'm an Hausa man or Igbo man in Lagos, I should be part of Omoteku. Right. It should not be a Yoruba thing. It should not be an Igbo thing. It should be a security outfit.
I think at the heart of this really is also the manpower challenge which security agencies have had. And well, the president spoke about it saying, but he says he will go beyond just the numbers, that he will go onto the welfare and all of that. And let me bring Group Captain in on this one and talk about the now that we have, an acting IGP, and he's made some pronouncements about the VIP guards, the PMF particularly, that's the police mobile force, being withdrawn from VIP escorts and guard duties. A lot of Nigerians heard that and they thought, why? We've heard this before, not once, not twice, and they wonder how would this play out. So in terms of cascading, the security architecture top to bottom across board, some have said, yes, if you will do that, if it's not just on paper, why not introduce private, guards, private outfits also to, fill in that space? But a two-dimension question. First, do you see the IGP going through with this time around such that it's not like what we've heard before? And what should replace this if we see that there's also a need to guard VIPs and the rest?
Thank you very much. The new IGP, I wish him the best. And he have come out spitting fire that is going to be different. And understandably, his promise that he would draw, he said, mobile police. He was specific about mobile police, not the ordinary police. He will withdraw mobile police from VIPs. Now, understandably, Nigerians are pessimistic. I am pessimistic myself, given the fact that his predecessors, almost every IGP that comes will start with, I am removing policemen from VIPs. And to be honest with you, when we say VIPs in Nigeria, we are Nigeria. That word VIPs covers a lot of yamayama. What do I mean by yamayama? Some of the people that even carry police escort. They are dubious people of dubious livelihood, and they are given police. In a country where we agree that the police to population ratio is very low, you carry 15 policemen and put in the house of somebody, whereas 14 policemen can guard a market and service about 10,000 or 5,000 people. It is not fair. So the IGP, I'm sure it has gotten to him. People do not believe he's going to do it. People, what we call in military, we call it initial gra-gra. They think that he's just doing initial gra-gra. But I hope he will listen to this pessimism and also show that he's different. He has promised us that he's going to roar like a tiger and act like a lion. Honestly, we wish him the best. We need that. But having said that, on the overall issue, again, you spoke about the general number of the arm of the security agencies, whether it is police, whether it is military, whether it is intelligence. One thing that came out of the presidential election, from the presidential debate, is that almost all the presidential candidates, including President Tinubu, who was won now, they spoke about increasing number. Increasing number. What we should be thinking now is having a think tank or a committee that will decide what is the optimal size of the armed forces of Nigeria. What should be the optimal size of the Nigerian police? And in arriving at that optimal size, we have to be very careful. It's also a function of economy. Because when you talk of increasing number of people, you have to think about accommodation for them, their salaries, their health care, and their general welfare. We should not arrive at a number that cannot be supported by our economy. That is why, if you are a security leader or a police leader at the top echelon, you are also to think strategically. Economy is your terrain. It's not only the police or the military issue.
Indeed.
If I have this number, how am I going to take care of them? So we want to see that happening.
Indeed, Group Captain.
Specific reference to the armed forces. I want to bring one issue that came into this thing. With the appointment of this service chiefs, we are likely to see about 100 plus major generals and equivalent across the Army, Navy, and Air Force leaving the service.
Indeed, Group Captain. The overriding interest here would be an increase in the number of people to police ratio, and if there's anything like that, people to armed forces ratio. Let me take you back to the management of the institutions and refer you to your article on who should be a defense minister. I read, you say here that there are some few pros and cons for a civilian minister of defense. While a civilian minister of defense may be able to bring fresh perspectives to the role and be better equipped to navigate the complex political landscape that often surrounds defense issues and is free of any single service or bias, he may be bamboozled by military chiefs with technical military terminologies towards ends that do not serve national interest. So, in other words, you are canvassing more for a military a minister of defense that has a military background. Will you also be canvassing for the minister of interior that also has a military background?
Well, in my understanding, the role that the Constitution or the nation needs from a minister of defense are a bit different from what is required for the Ministry of Interior. The Ministry of Interior minister does not necessarily have to be. In fact, I will opt for a civilian, with some security, intelligence, or legal. You don't have to serve in the military to have those. Maybe through education or through training or through previous work you might have worked. But for the Minister of Defense, yes, it is true. I tried, despite my affiliation being a former military man, I don't know whether I succeeded. I tried to bring an unbiased opinion of giving the pros and cons of picking a civilian Minister of Defense and a Minister of Defense with a military background. I tried to do that because there is nothing that says the minister, let's get it clear, there's nothing that says the Minister of Defense must be a military man. But when we look at global best practices, even in Nigeria, when we look at performances, if we look at the nature of the military, being, I'm sorry to use this word, the military is a very insular institution. If somebody does not have the inner workings, how the military is organized, how it functions, how it is equipped, how its culture and traditions are, for a civilian, if you bring a civilian to head the military, to be honest with you, he will take like a year or two trying to grapple with the terminologies, with the custom, and then we don't have that time. We want somebody who will hit the ground running. So I give the advantages. If you put a military man, he knows the area. But again, even in doing that, I'm happy you read my article. I underline some traps that a military man who is a minister of defense should avoid. Well, when you are minister of defense, you are representing the government. You are representing the interest of the nation. You are not representing simply the interest of the armed forces. Sometimes the interest of the armed forces and national interest may coincide. Well, indeed. But there are times where the interest of the service is not in the interest of the nation. This is where your job as Minister of Defense should kick in. Again, I underline the fact that a Minister of Defense will all have our services. I'm in the Air Force.
Oh, Group Captain, looks like we lost connection with you there. Certainly very interesting read, that article and some others which you've written, but we have to anchor at this point. There's also that huge conversation about the economic reality and its effect on security. But we'll have to thank you so much, Group Captain Sadiq Shehu, retired security sector reform and governance expert, as well as Mr. Alfred Ononugbo, forensic investigator, criminal intelligence specialist and security consultant, who joins us right here in our Lagos studio. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for your time.
Well, there's been so much talk about the National Assembly, the work which the National Assembly has. But we're going to focus on that, not just regarding security, but governance at large. And that's our conversation in a moment. Stay with us.